And you know what that means. It's another episode of The Locker Room, where the BS stops and the analysis starts. As always, here we are. I'm one of your three hosts tonight, Kyle Anderson. Joining me, as always,
it's Brandon Jones live in the locker room.
Matt Hersch right here in the locker room.
And Reggie Huffman will not be with us tonight. Apparently, he is in San Antonio trying to see if he can find the Spurs game. But, with that being said, you know what the topic is. The NBA. Oh, yes, the National Basketball Association, where we all get to let out our frustrations, just like the New York Knicks in a fire extinguisher. But we digress. Here's the subject tonight, guys. The NBA lockout finally had a season. People seem to be happy. We're going to kick it right off with the big question. Brandon, I'll go to you first. What effect do you think the lockout had?
It's had an effect from the standpoint of they get 66 games in short period of time. You don't have the 3-day rest that you usually would have. So it took a lot of teams a lot of time to get that continuity that they normally would have around the Christmas or January. But it's had an effect. We've seen a lot of injuries because of this. A lot of nagging injuries. So it's played its part.
Matt, what do you think?
Well, and I'm kind of shocked because I thought it would have an adverse effect, but as exemplified by our show and by our Facebook page, there's a lot of conversation about the NBA. People are talking about it. People haven't probably talked this much about the NBA in a long time, in many years. So it's definitely played an effect because of the shortened season, the number of games that have played, just the drama, the dramatics that have gone on in this playoffs because of, like Brandon said, some of the injuries and just the issues with depth. So it's definitely played a role. It's had an effect.
Speaking of injuries, Will Vincent commented on our Facebook page, and he brought up Baron Davis and Derrick Rose. He was just naming a couple people that got injured, and he kind of did equate that to basically the shorter season, like you said, Brandon, 66 games. Do you really think that could have been the reason why they got hurt, or do you think, hey, injuries just happen?
No, in those particular cases, injuries just happen. There's not a workout that you can do that will prevent a torn ACL or Achilles injury. So those are just injuries that are just going to happen. But we're talking about a lot of those fatigue injuries that we see. A lot of guys going kind of half speed because their wind is not quite there. Those nagging injuries, those. But as far as like ACLs and things like that, really nothing you can do about that.
Now, Matt, here's a good question for you. We have this shorter season. You've got the Celtics. You've got the Spurs. They're in the conference final. They're in the conference finals against two younger teams, the Heat and the Thunder. And a lot of people are saying, okay, well, this shorter season, some people think it helps the older teams. Some of them think it doesn't. Now, we saw the Thunder beat the Spurs, so the Spurs are gone. Now it's the Heat and the Celtics, and the Celtics are up one game on the Heat. All they got to do is win one more, and they're going to the championship. Do you really think that shortened season has helped the older teams?
Well, and, it depends on the way these teams choose to look at it and choose to use it to their advantage. The Spurs, it hurt them as far as just their conditioning, just the fatigue. That's probably what got to them. If you look at the Celtics, and we don't know what's going to happen, the Heat could easily come back because of when we're recording the show. But the Celtics are using their experience to an advantage over the Heat. The fact that it's a shortened season, they know how to deal with adversity. They're using that to an advantage. So it could be spun different ways, and I guess it's a choice, the way teams are looking at it. The Spurs had it as a disadvantage. The Celtics could use it as an advantage. So,
and for a lot of people, the Spurs making that run that they did, they had not lost a playoff game. And then all of a sudden, they go into Oklahoma City and they run into the Thunder, and it's just like everything fell apart. They lost the next 4 games, and they're out of there.
They were going to be the greatest playoff team of all time. If they would have not lost, which it looked like for a point in time they weren't, they could have easily been the greatest playoff team of all time. And, I was listening to another sports radio show earlier today, and they posed the question, is this one of the greatest professional sports collapses of all time? Because not only were they doing so well, they lost 4 in a row. 4 in a row.
I mean, when you look at it, honestly, the Thunder should have won the first game.
Right.
The second game kind of got out of hand, but about midway through the third quarter and the fourth quarter, you saw that point that Oklahoma City had figured them out. And Brian Burrell actually called the shot then. He was like, hey, the Spurs don't have an answer for it. And, that's what ended up happening. No answer.
Now, do you think Father Time just finally caught up with the Spurs? Because, you got Tim Duncan and a lot of the guys on that team, they've been there for a while. Do you think it was, hey, the youth of the Thunder finally just wore out the experience and the age of the Spurs?
Man, I think that the Thunder is just a better basketball team. Just looking over, and a lot of people like to give the Spurs that old, they're the old team. Outside of Tim Duncan, and I know we think Tony Parker's old, but he's only 29.
Right.
He's just been in the league. Manu Ginobili's 32. They're not as old as people like to make them out to be. But this Thunder movement, we've seen this start about 3 years ago. I mean, this team's going to be here to stay.
Yeah, the Thunder might easily be the new dynasty, the new NBA dynasty. If they keep that team together, they could easily run off a good handful of championships because they're a great team. They really are.
No, and like you said, Tony Parker he's not old. Eva Longoria may have made him a little older with all the stuff they had to go through, but I don't think he's old. Now, going to the next phase of it, how do y'all think this has affected the fans? Do you think it's made it better because, hey, you got the shortened season. You don't have the 88 games. Now you got 66. I mean, do you think the fans, it's made them pay more attention now because, hey, there was a fear they might not even have a basketball season?
2012 ticket sales for the NBA are at an all-time high. Enough said.
Matt, what do you think?
Well, it created a little bit more drama. I still think the season's too long, but I think that pretty much all pro sport seasons are too long. That's another conversation for another day. But it started Christmas Day. It had a lot of pomp and circumstance starting Christmas Day, when that's the unofficial big game, first big national network game anyway. So starting then and ending when it normally does, shortening the schedule, compressing the games to less time in between the games, it's made it more fun to watch.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I found myself watching it more this year than I normally would have.
And it's funny because looking at the ratings that Nielsen came out with, the week ending May 27th, right before Memorial Day, the top 5 ratings in cable were all NBA games. Lakers and the Thunder, which we all knew was going to be important because, Metta World Peace, a.k.a. Ron Artest, after he elbows.
His damn name is Ron.
Yeah.
Mama named him Ron, and we calling him Ron.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks, Reggie.
And
we've heard that before, yeah.
And the good thing about it is, but when you go to the next week, ending June 3rd, all due respect, Hatfield and McCoy's was a great show.
Yeah.
It took the top 3 spots. But this is what's so amazing. As you mentioned, the Thunder's a good team. Spurs is a good team. All of the Thunder Spurs games were at the bottom. I mean, one of the games, Saturday night's game, actually got beat by Pawn Stars. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but it seems like everybody wants to see Miami. That's what it looks like from the ratings.
I want to see Miami lose.
Exactly.
I mean,
so that goes to the next question. Where is all this hatred coming from of Miami and the Heat? Where is it LeBron? Is it because they've got those players together and they think they're arrogant?
It's not necessarily just hatred for the Heat. I mean, that's one of many storylines. That's what's making this postseason great. Hatred of the Heat's one thing. In one of our questions on our Facebook page, which sports team do you think has been the biggest disappointment of 2012? Jarrett Franklin said the Bulls because they caught a hard break with Rose going down. Well, that hits home. I'm a Bulls fan. I'm not gonna lie about that. So, that played a part. That was a big story. The Spurs potentially being one of the greatest, playoff teams ever. The Thunder's comeback. The Celtics age. The Pacers essentially having no big names but still being successful. It's been a lot of great storylines.
Brandon, what do you think?
I mean, people need something to hate. It's that hatred that fuels everything. It's that hatred that gets the eyeballs. It's the Yankees. It's the Patriots. It's the Heat. It's that something to hate that keep people coming back. We want something to hate.
And it's funny because Dallas, Marcus Darby, he said on our Facebook page, dude, the Dallas Mavericks, that was his team, was the biggest disappointment. They win the championship, and they're put out the first round, but a lot of people knew they probably were not going to make a run. But go back to last year, like you were saying, and like Matt was saying, you had Dallas and you had Miami. Everybody hated Miami. But it's like, if you're the NBA, I need Miami in that championship game because, as you said, Matt, people will turn it on just to watch them lose. So when people say they hate LeBron, or I can't stand LeBron, or Dwayne Wade or Chris Bosh or any of these guys, what is it about LeBron that just makes them not like him?
All right, a lot of people will point to the decision. And we kind of talked about this before the show. What gets swept up under the rug about the decision is ESPN went to LeBron. It wasn't the other way around. LeBron said, okay, I'll do it, but I want this money to go to this particular charity. I think it was the YMCA.
Yeah, and
Boys and Girls Club.
It was Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, and that's where he did it, made the decision from. They set it up in their little makeshift studio at that Boys and Girls Club.
So they go to him. He said, okay, I'll do it, but I want this to go to this. And everybody lose the fact that he raised over $1 million for the Boys and Girls Club. Lose all that. I just don't like the way that he made the decision. He shouldn't have done that. And a lot of people will say, well, he shouldn't have left Cleveland. If you follow basketball, you know that for 70 years, LeBron James has been asking Cleveland for help. And you know what they did? Hey, this is a guy that used to be Shaq. Here you go. Now here's Antoine Jameson when he's four years past his prime. Here you go. He asked. He never received. They know that he was leaving. People, like I said, just want something to hate.
Well, and that's a good question. I encourage our listeners to actually post comments on our videos on YouTube or Facebook. Do you blame LeBron James for leaving Cleveland? We talked about it before the show. We all said no. And I don't want to influence anybody else, but go ahead and, if you're listening to this, post your response, because I think that we're going to probably find conclusively that nobody blames him for leaving Cleveland. It's the big deal, the big circus that ESPN put on with it. We were comparing it with Peyton Manning leaving the Colts. They had a press conference. That's normal. Standard operating procedure for a professional player to leave a team. Well, it was just different, and people are afraid of different. I guess that's probably it.
Well, and Cole Gray, I think the way he put it is, he said the reason if the Heat do not make it to the championship and it's a big deal is because of LeBron, and they say he's got an immature attitude, and that's his problem. But we also got to remember, how old is LeBron?
He's 27 years old.
Yeah, and I know people are going to say, yeah, but have a little bit of humility. But
here's another question: the fact that LeBron didn't go to college, does that make people perceive him as being immature?
And if that's the case, then why don't they hate Kobe? Because Kobe didn't go. A lot
of people hate Kobe
because a lot of his perceived immaturity. Look at this guy. The guy's never gotten into any off the court problems. He's never been on the court problem. You see him in his interviews. He's a class act guy. So where are these immaturity issues that people quote unquote think of him? Where are they coming from?
Well, Brandon, you've always said it best. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Hate the game.
Well, as we all said, guys, this is a subject that's going to go into part 2. So join us for part 2. We discuss the status of the NBA. Don't go away. This is The Locker Room.